Come to Candlelight Inn, home of the original Chicken George and Jan Sauce. Dine in, carry out, and catering available. Located in Rock Falls and Sterling, Illinois, as well as Clinton, Iowa. Come try our original Chicken George today.
Need a roof, vinyl windows, or doors? Call R.E. Duchesne Construction. With an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau and servicing Will, Grundy, and Kendall counties, call R.E. Duchesne. 815-722-2821. Financing available. Find out more online at reduchene.com.
Are going to come right down to the wire. Yeah, he really likes this field. Team of the Week MVP.
I like Reich.
Since 2016, it's been my privilege to represent the people of the 63rd District. I want to continue representing you as an independent voice in Springfield.
I like Reich. We like Reich.
We're here to help you with your problems that result from an automobile accident or an injury on the job or the loss of a loved one. There's no reason you should go through this alone and guess that you're doing things right.
We deal with tragedies that affect families and individuals every day.
Come here and protect your interest. We've been doing this collectively for over 100 years. Let's put that experience to work for you.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to a live edition of the Friday Night Drive podcast. That's right. We are doing this live here at 11 a.m. Monday, October 23rd. Souce, this is a bit different for us, man.
Yeah, a little bit. Just kind of looking at what's going on and taking it all into effect. Usually we sit around and chat about some stuff before we go on, but we're going right into it. Jump right in, get our feet wet.
Yeah, I can't even, we just hit a milestone recently for the number of Friday Night Drive podcast edition. I believe it was, we hit the 200 mark if I'm not losing my mind. Crazy to think we've hit it this far or made it this far already. But we usually record this podcast at 11 a.m. on Monday and Thursday morning each week during the season. Wanted to start doing this live during the postseason. We got so much to talk about. Try and take some of your guys' questions. If you're watching live on YouTube this morning, I already see Alex Acevedo in here with playoff chat here. I'll throw that up on the screen. Exactly. If you're watching live on YouTube, you can ask us questions. We appreciate anything you guys have for us. We're going to go 1A through 8A today. It's the easiest way really to kind of go through this and break down these brackets now that we have a bit of some time after Saturday night to have digested these brackets, Zeus. But before I throw them on screen, just now, like I said, Ed, you've had a little bit of time. What's your thoughts?
A lot of these brackets, for the most part, they came out pretty much exactly the way I was kind of expecting them to after kind of a mild week 9, but things that kind of stand out to me just looking at it after, digesting them for about 24 hours. The 2A North bracket is absolutely loaded. Just a ridiculous amount of depth in there. And then, there are the other classifications. There seems to be a lot of even distribution and a lot of games in the first round that you're not really accustomed to seeing as first round matchups. Kind of anticipated that might happen. We've talked about it all year long. Some teams, piled up some losses that maybe you're not accustomed to seeing them have losses. So that led to some different matchups in the first round that, when you look at them immediately, you're not planning out to round 2 or round 3. you're getting them right away.
Yeah, Prairie Ridge Naz, as Jerry says this morning, Prairie Ridge Naz should be a doozy. We mentioned that right away on Saturday when when Soucie, you had that projected. I was just immediately like, oh no, that is a matchup we could have been seeing down in Bloomington potentially if it was a 1 to 32 bracket. But certainly a matchup if you told me that was a state semifinal in 5A North, I wouldn't have been surprised.
Well, one of the things that I really like the IHSA playoff system, but there are a few things about it that I do not like. And I would be okay if we use the current process to get teams into the field. But I think the mistake that we've been making for a really long time is how we seed it once we decide who gets in. I strongly believe that the team should be seeded by what is now the second tiebreaker. That should be seeded in order of the number of wins of the teams you beat, not just the teams you play. And I think that would change the stacking of the seeding and make it a lot more even. We'd still occasionally get games like this. That's not a perfect system either, but I think that would fix some of these situations where you have a team like Naz who is in the bottom of the bracket because they're a 4 and 5 team, but in that scenario would move up quite a bit because of the quality of wins that they do have.
So I'm going to throw up on the screen now. If you see TBD on here, we've been doing our best to get these updated throughout the week, and the IHSA does not officially update these until Monday afternoon. So these have all been sourced either from coaches or athletic directors coming to us or social media accounts. So if you see one on here that you've seen a time, you can throw that in the chat. We'll get that updated as long as we can confirm it. But the rest of these will be confirmed later this afternoon. But Soucie, just going back to your point about how you would prefer to see these seated in that situation here. So like, how would you kind of roughly be able to walk us through how this would change in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, it would really come down to, like, you're looking at a lot of the schools that are sitting there at 8-1 or 7-2. In some scenarios where their wins, the only wins that they've gotten are coming against teams with inferior records. So, there are teams out there that were 6-3 that have only beaten one team with a winning record all year long. So in that scenario, I mean, just like, you can't do it with 8A, which is the bracket, of course, that I'm looking at right in front of me. But, like all of the other ones, like the 1 to 16 ones, I think like Naz, for example, we'd have, they've got, a ton of playoff points, but they would factor in probably somewhere in the neighborhood of having like 16 to 18 of those second stage points. And some of the teams in the 5A field have 8 points, 11 points. Like, I mean, that's the nature of the situation. You take a team from a locked conference that went 5-4 in the regular season. Typically, they have 10 points. They beat a 4-win team, they beat a 3-win team, they beat a 2-win team, and they beat a 1-win team. That's 10 points in that situation. But you take a team like Nazareth, who beat some quality teams in the regular season. They beat Brother Rice, who ended up with 5 wins. They beat this, so they would have more points, despite the fact that they were 4 and 5, and some of these other teams are 5 and 4 and 6 and 3. They would have more points because that's based on the quality of their victories, not just their overall schedule. So it's not a perfect system. Like I said, there are some teams that are seeded much, much higher than I would seed them if I was basing it on what I felt the personal merit was, even in that system. But I think it would change around some of these situations where you would have, power teams from the Catholic League that took losses in the regular season coming into this bracket. You look at 7A, you've got, Brother Rice sitting down there at 26, Mount St. Rita at 27. That's not where they belong. Let's be honest. I mean,
yeah.
And then there are, and I hate to pick on them, but like a team like Addison Trail, who has like one of the smallest point totals in the state for playoff points, and then that second stage is even lower, are on there. Willowbrook in the middle of the 7A field, 23 playoff points. I mean, but they're seated higher because they have 7 wins. Well, those wins came over teams without very many wins. So it's not, I think, that would be a more, I guess, fair way to kind of break it down.
All right. Appreciate that insight, Seuss. All right, guys. We got quite a few questions and comments in here already. Really appreciate it. I was not sure. Our first time doing this at 11 a.m. Not sure or doing this live, how many people we'd get on a Monday morning, but it's awesome to see everyone in here. So I'm going to dive into the questions and comments here. Rick Gonzalez, actually, I love to see it. Rick is a regular on our Bears podcast that we live stream. Sean Hammond and I, usually at 9:30 on Mondays and Friday morning. Rick was with me live a little bit ago. Just stop by to support what you're doing, Kyle. Keep up the hard work, man. I love it, Rick. Thanks. Let's see. We got Go Nash from Mark in here. View from the West, a good podcast. Anyone who is interested, of course, I got to promote our own podcast here, guys. The Illinois Valley podcast that Eddie Carriffio and JT Penalty launched this year, but also the View from the West podcast. Those guys out there along the Mississippi River do an awesome job. You can also find those guys on Twitter. They say the 2A North is loaded, but who are your front runners coming out of 2A South, Seuss? What do you think?
There are a couple teams that kind of, I guess, jump off the page a little bit for me. Athens is a team that I really like out of the Sangamo. I say that every time, but there's reason for that. I think they're a pretty strong team there at 7-2. The geography of this bracket ended up splitting the actual winner of the Sangamo Conference, putting them in the 2A North, along with 3 other undefeated teams.
Hey,
but
that is weird.
Yeah, it was.
I didn't notice that.
It was trending that way all year long because Moreau was blocking in as what I call the number 16 team in the North, which if you order them north to south, I rank them 1 to 16 on how they look on the map. And Moreau Forsyth was going between 16 in the North to 1 in the South and bouncing back and forth based on who the other 30 or 31 teams were. And it just finally in the last week, it cleared up. They were the 16 team in the South. So, so that there are some people asking me on Saturday when it looked like that was the way the 2A bracket was going to be, if they might bracket balance a little bit by tweaking that line a little bit. And that's something that I think you could make a case that they've done in the past, but based on the fact that I kind of looked at it after the fact, our maps this year agreed 100% on where the north-south line should be split in all of the classes. And that hasn't happened for a while. So I think they were simply looking at the map and drawing a clear north-south line, and that's the way it broke. But to answer the question, I like Athens a lot. Another team,
Nashville.
Of course, you got to include Nashville.
Come on. I pencil them in for a state quarterfinal run at this point. I know better.
Yeah, so it's definitely that's in the cards. And of course, I got to mention who I think might be the sleeper in here, the 16th seed, Quincy Notre Dame.
I was looking at that.
They're 4-5 on the year. Their schedule was an independent schedule, so it's hard to get a really good read on them. But their losses are to really good teams. They beat a couple of pretty decent teams out of Missouri. I think that's an interesting team that we got to keep an eye on.
I'm trying to pull up that schedule here. Let's see, 3 straight wins to end the season. 2 out of state here to teams in St. Louis. Decatur that's just so odd to see Decatur St. Teresa at 1-8 and a 55-8 win for Quincy Notre Dame in that matchup. Wow, what a turnaround from a season ago.
Yeah, I think that might be the one of the largest negative turnarounds off of a state championship that I can ever remember. So, but it was a tough situation for them. They kind of got jettisoned from their conference, and they had to hodgepodge together a schedule. And if you look at their schedule, that would have been a rough road for just about anybody. And St. Teresa's smaller program lost a lot of kids to graduation, so kind of the perfect storm for them.
I completely forgot Riverside Brookfield was an independent too.
Technically, they played a full Southland Conference schedule. So I kind of have lumped them into the Southland Conference. That was only a 1-year deal. They're leaving for the Upstate 8 next year, but
It just looks weird to see him listed under the independents here.
It didn't even move him. The IHSA didn't even move him until like week 5. They had him in the Southland because it seemed like they were actually in the Southland.
And then, Quincy Notre Dame all the way back week 1 and week 2, or the first 3 weeks of the season here. They played Quincy, 9-0 team, Richmond Burden, a very quality 4-0 or 4A program, Muhammad Seymour 7-2 on the season. Yeah, now this Quincy Notre Dame team is in the 1A Southfield. I have no idea what to expect out of them, but I also wouldn't be surprised to find them still competing a couple weeks into the playoffs.
Let me correct you there real quick, though. You said 1A South. They're 2A.
2A, 2A, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, let's see. What else we got here? Zachary Shimon had said, seen a lot of Friday games. You guys think this is because of the official shortage? No, traditionally, we tend to get a lot of Friday night games in the first round, particularly the northern half of the state where the travel's a lot less. A lot of first round games on Fridays. Now that we're in the playoffs, I would be surprised that it was if anyone had trouble finding officials. But that does continue to be quite an interesting topic statewide when it comes to the regular season, Zeus.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think, most teams like to try to prefer to play on Friday in that first round, because once you get on that Saturday mold, you're not going back to Friday. So for me, I almost hope that they almost mandate it that you have to play that week 1 on Friday, because I want as many Friday weekends as I can still get. I'm greedy. Fortunately, last year we got at least one Friday game all the way into the semifinal round. So that made me happy. But, basically, like I said, once teams turn the page and start scheduling Saturday games, they don't want to give up that day of prep if they win. So they're not going to go back to Friday. So as soon as you start seeing, teams go that way, they're not going back. So we'll run out of Friday games real fast.
Well, I like the people that hold out as long as they can, and that typically is the smaller classes, which I understand, because like if you're going to play on Friday a state championship anyway, why not try and hold out as long as you can?
Yeah. So I mean, eventually, 1 through 4, that's going to catch up with you eventually. I mean, if you can keep going on Friday, you probably should. But I mean, the other classifications are just trying to kind of keep themselves on the on a normal schedule if they can. So it's always kind of a debate as far as the officials go. I mean, once you get to this point, you've trimmed that need for officials down to 128 games. Your average Friday night during the regular season has about 210 to 220 games. So I don't think that's a factor in this. And I hope it's never a factor, to be totally honest with you. If it ever gets to that point, then we've got a real problem.
Yeah, we're really hurting at that point. Alex says, great seating for Bradley Bourbonnais home playoff game. Alex, we'll go down here at, let's see if I can pull up 7A here. Let's see. There we go. Let's see. We got Bradley Bourbonnais at home as a 16 seed, looking at a Saturday game against St. Charles North. I got to tell you, Alex, be careful what you wish for there. I wouldn't call that great seating. I mean, it's great in terms of they did get it that home game. I'm wary of having to face any team in the Duquesne from the Duquesne Conference. So, how about you, Zeus?
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. I think that's a very interesting game. I think both teams have the capability to put up quite a few points. Question is how the defenses respond in that contest. Just kind of an interesting setup. I don't know if you saw this, Kyle, but the field will be warmed up for these two teams. There's actually a playoff game going on before that at Bradley Bourbonnais at noon. Moments is playing their home playoff game at Bradley because of a field issue that they have at the school. So they're playing that game at noon. So the field will get a nice little warm up. It's not very often that a school hosts 2 playoff games on the same day. That's usually reserved for public league division fields, but kind of a unique quirk there.
Alex clarifies here, said Bradley at home. I was thinking they would be on the road. Yeah. If you want a little more insight into St. Charles North too, Jake Bartleson and Josh Welke will be along. They record the Western Suburbs edition of the Friday Night Drive podcast. Jake covers St. Charles North pretty extensively. He's got so he'll have every bit of info you need. on St. Charles North. If you're a Bradley Bourbonnais fan, those guys will be hitting really, like I said, Kendall County, Western Cook County, DuPage County. They do an awesome job. Let's see what else we got here in the comments. Brett says 4A semifinal game prediction. Brett, hold on just for a little second, because as we get caught up on the comments here, I think we're going to start working our way 1A through 8A here, and we'll kind of give an idea of what we're thinking for each of these brackets. Let's see. I love any Breaking Bad reference you're going to get on the screen from me. Jesse, we need to cook. How do you think DuPec will fare against the big Northern Conference teams? Oregon, then Stillman, and then Byron. Let's see. Is that 3A?
That is 3A, yes.
Yeah. Let's see. We got DuPec is against Oregon. You know, I definitely like that first round matchup for DuPec there. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I mean, Byron's tough.
I think he's right. I think he's right in the scaling there. I think that he's right. They're probably going to see 3 big Northern Conference teams in a row if they keep winning.
Yeah, we got the
Stillman
Chicago
Valley,
Public League.
Stillman Valley's playing a CPL team, and then both Byron and Piatone are playing CPL teams. Byron's obviously a big favorite to beat Piatone. So yeah, I think he's right. I think he's reading the path correctly. But I will say, when I look at the big Northern Conference, we're talking about a wide disparity between Byron and the rest of the league. I think both of those, the first 2 games are entirely winnable for Durand-Pecatonica against those 2 schools, because it feels like that second division of the big Northern maybe isn't quite at the level that it has been in past seasons. But I do think Byron is a cut above just about everybody in this class.
I think the name Stillman Valley probably is putting more fear in you than the actual roster this year. So DuPec, I think you're right, Sue, is going to be favored in both of those games. All right. We're going to go ahead here. We're about 20 minutes in, Sue. So let's go back up to 1A here, guys. We'll try and hit any more questions and comments come in here. But most part, you guys are asking about specific things from like each class. So we're going to go ahead quickly, Sue. 1A, let's start there. Lena Winslow, Camp Point Central, your top seeds. I think we talked about this a little bit on Saturday night already. Personally, I love Lena at the top there. Hope Academy is another team I'll be paying attention to. On the south side, Camp Point Central is a team that we're used to seeing in state championships. The one team there, as I said, we talked about on Saturday night, Althoff Catholic in 1A. Those are really the 4 teams I have starting there. What else you got, Seuss?
I was looking at this last night. I was kind of digging in a little bit more, and I know we both like Hope Academy a lot, but the one thing that I did not realize until I was looking last night, Hope Academy has never advanced past the second round of the playoffs in any division in any year. And I think we kind of fall in love with what the entire package is, and then we get into one of those games and they just kind of have a hiccup. So I don't know if I'd put them on the parallel of getting that deep. And you also have to consider Aurora Christian's right underneath them in the bracket. If they move on,
they beat them, right?
They beat them, and then they're paired off to potentially play in the second round. So, I like Morrison a lot up there. And that's another team that I think might be able to make a run. But they have a really challenging first round game with a 6-3 team that I like. And then on the bottom, you mentioned them already. I think that's a Belleville Althoff situation where I think they're the team that I favor out of the South bracket. But I'll tell you one thing right now: if it pairs out the way it could by seed, that potential quarterfinal game between Camp Point Central and Belleville Althoff, you might have to, if you're watching that on video, you might have to slow it down so you can see people. I mean, tons of speed on both sides of the field.
All right, we're going to keep going right along here. If you're listening to the podcast version of this and not joining us live, you can now join us live 11 a.m. on Mondays and Thursdays throughout the postseason. We'll be breaking down these brackets for you guys. And, of course, go to FridayNightDrive.com if you want to follow along. We have the brackets up there. We'll have plenty of preview content for you throughout the week. Going over to 2A suits. Where do you want to start here?
I mentioned 2A North again, and it's just I kind of tried to sketch out what I thought the possible permutations were of that bracket. and my goodness, it is something else. There are so many good teams on this side of the bracket. You have an 8-1 team on the road, which almost never happens. A really incredible situation. I was laughing last night. I believe it was the View from the West podcast. Came up with the comment that the trip from Rock Ridge to Westville is only a few miles shorter than the trip from Westville to Cincinnati, Ohio. I thought that was amusing. So I gotta love that mapping. I don't know why we can't go 1-32, but whatever. So that's an argument for another day. But I mean, you have the 4 undefeated teams, and I get to that where we're sitting in that quarterfinal round. There are some potential doozies right there. I like Maroa a ton, but I just feel like picking chalk here is going to be a mistake. I just can't tell you which one of the top teams are going to fall because I like them all so much. They're going to be some really interesting games here as quickly as almost right out of the box. Like, we have some first round games on this side of the bracket that are they're page turners. They're really, really good.
I mean, Moment's had a terrific out of nowhere regular season, and a first round matchup against Knoxville is not an easy assignment. Bismarck Henning as an 11 seed at Farmington. That's not an easy assignment. Mercer County, Wilmington. I love that matchup in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those where you look at it and there's 2 programs right there that you're used to seeing second, third, fourth rounds where they have that, and you're just looking at it in the first round and you're going, geez. I mean, you mentioned it. For me, as an 11, Bismarck, that's a crazy seed. So, I mean, I'm uncomfortable making a call right now in this because I feel like whoever I might say could be gone in the second round. I mean, that's what it really comes down to.
I like this comment from Jesse. We need a cook. Rockridge getting a potential home game versus Seneca is intriguing. Seneca might fall early. I think you can say that about a lot of the teams in the bracket, and that is certainly a very tough matchup for Seneca if it comes to fruition in the second round against Rockridge.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what you're kind of looking at. I mean, every one of these, if you look at it, you match up those second round games. I mean, Wilmington going to Tri-Valley. I mean, Tri-Valley 10-0 at that point. I've seen that game before in the playoffs, and it's been a pretty competitive football game, and I think it would be again. I mean, Moreau and Moments, Bloomington Central Catholic, and whoever comes out of that Farmington Bismarck game, all of them are games that, like, I feel like I should be talking about at the earliest in the quarters and possibly even as deep as the semis.
We hit on 2A South a little earlier, Suit. Anything else you want to add to that quickly, though?
Not really. I think we've got to move on here. We got to get a lot of brackets in. So
yeah. Got to get done by noon today, guys. So we're gonna just keep on going through here. 3A. Talking about that a little. Byron, heavy favorite, guys, in 3A North. I like Princeton. I like Montini. Don't get me wrong. It's just the fact of the matter. Byron, with the way they've played, everything we've seen out of that program, it's Tigers or bust for me in 3A North, Suze.
Well, it definitely feels like a different situation in 3A North than we've had the last couple of years, where we felt like, oh my gosh. I mean, there's 6, 7, 8 teams in here that can make some noise. 2 teams that I'd like to bring to the forefront before we just say this is Byron's bracket: Princeton. And the 6th seed Montini. They've been out of the playoffs for a few years, but this is a team that's been, going through the meat grinder all year long against quality 5, 6, and 7A programs. They're going to get down here to 3, and they're going to almost feel like they're probably a little bit superhuman. That's the reality of the situation. So, and what I see on the bracket is a pretty decent draw for Montini on the first couple of rounds there. So, they're going to be a tough out, I think.
Yeah, definitely. All right. How about the south side of this bracket? What do you think?
It's a very confusing bracket because I'm not sure about all of the 9-0s. Roxana's kind of come out of nowhere this year at 9-0. Greenville plays in the South Central Conference, which they've had some success, and they've, get to maybe the second or third round, but I don't know about that conference's ability to go all the way. So I kind of question some of the teams that come out of there. the interesting seeds to me in here, kind of in the middle of the pack.
I feel like that 8-9 matchup.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at Williamsville and Tolono Unity in that 8-9 game. Another team that I always like in the postseason because they always seem to get it done. The 4 seed Mount Carmel at 8-1. Their lone loss came to an Indiana team, Gibson Southern, who's really, really good. So I kind of refer to them as kind of being undefeated too. They're on that 4 line for a reason, but that's, and then a better than people realize Olympia team down at number 7. I hate to keep banging the drum I don't hate to keep banging the drum for the Sangamo. It's just a good conference and they have a lot of good teams. So, that's, they finished in kind of a tie for 3rd place there with a couple of other teams in that league. But, I kind of think they can make some noise. So it's definitely an interesting bottom half of that bracket too. I think we might have some lower seeds make some noise.
All right, 4A North. The last couple of years we've been talking about this being a loaded bracket, and while there are some very, very good teams in here, I know who your favorite coming into this is going to be already, and understandably so. I do feel like outside of that, probably not as deep of bracket as we've seen in recent years.
No, it doesn't feel that way. And I was kind of looking at this last night too. You have to consider when you look at 4A that this is almost a completely different bracket than what we've become accustomed to over the last couple of years. Both combatants in the state championship are now in different classes. Joliet Catholic is another powerhouse that has made a lot of noise in this. They're also in a different class. One of the new favorites was not in 4A last year. In IC Catholic, they were in 3A last year. So, the heavies in this division are kind of all different names than what we were talking about this time last year in 4A.
Yeah, and as I was alluding to there, I'm looking through this bracket. I honestly don't know a ton about this Boylan Catholic team. I need to go through it and find out some more about that. But like Richmond Burton, I have questions about. Dixon, I have some questions about. I think IC Catholic, despite sitting there at a 7 seed, is probably a fairly substantial favorite in the northern bracket here.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way that I see it. I think maybe out of the bottom of that bracket, I think St. Lawrence might be able to make a little bit of noise too. I think that's a good path for them. But yeah,
that is a good path.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you.
And then on the south side of the bracket, let me scan here. I like Murfreesboro. I like Kewanee. Outside of that, despite that, I'm gonna go ahead and say Rochester or bust.
I'm on the same page. I really think that they're a cut above here. It's a really strong football team for 4A, and that's I'd be surprised if anyone else was representing the South bracket.
I feel pretty confident here. Like, I think this is the first one where I feel. Scroll back up here, Byron. I don't know how I feel about that. I think this is the first time I feel really, really confident. We're IC Catholic versus Rochester, your favorite in this bracket.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to 1A2 a little bit where I think I can peg the final 2, but I think that's
Lena.
I think that's a Lena Althoff final personally, but that's that's where I'm at.
The only reason I don't say that is because I like Camp Point Central a lot.
That's fair. I can understand that.
All right. Going down here, we're now at Class 5A. Seuss. I mean, we've hit on the Prairie Ridge Naz game quite a bit. Scanning through, I mean, that Morris team on the south side of the bracket is really good. Trying to think on the I'm going to tell you what. It's a first round game. I think Prairie Ridge and Naz is probably the best matchup that you're going to see in the entire. I don't want to discount Sycamore. I feel bad saying that, but it's just how I feel. PR Naz are the 2 best teams, I think, here.
I would make an argument for St. Francis, who just beat Naz. If you want to talk about,
I completely overlook St. Francis. I'm sorry, St. Francis. Bob McMillan, if he's watching right now or listening later, is going to throw something at the screen.
So
Yeah.
for me, that's kind of the way that I look at it. When you look at that North bracket, I think there are 4 teams that stand out from, well, maybe 5, that step away from the rest of the group, and 2 of them are playing each other in the first round, like we've already talked about. So, I think it's the heavies there. Obviously, Wheaton, St. Francis, Sycamore, Prairie Ridge, Nazareth, and I'd include Carmel in that group. Of teams.
So not used to seeing St. Francis in 5A either.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's another jump from 4A. These are teams that we've been talking about in 4A in past seasons. Now they're in 5. So and then that happens again down in that South bracket. So Morris has been a 4A, 5A bubble team. Joliet Catholic's been in 4. Providence has been in 4. Really the only 5A staple on the bottom half of the bracket is Peoria. So that's another interesting kind of setup type of situation.
Love the way Morris is playing on that south side of the bracket. Who else do you like down there?
I was interested to see what would happen with Morton in their game with Washington this week. They got handled pretty easily. Morton won their first 8 games and beat some good teams early in the season. They still kind of intrigue me a little bit, but that is a rough first round draw with Providence, a team that doesn't look real flashy on paper, but battle tested in the playoffs, played a quality schedule, seemed to figure out a way to get it done this time of year. Over, the last year's run to the state championship was a little bit unexpected, but they know how to win. So I'm intrigued by both of those teams. Kind of a sleeper from underneath here, Decatur MacArthur. Kind of raised some eyebrows by beating Sacred Heart Griffin in week 8. Follow that up by beating a pretty good Bloomington team handily in week 9. I think this team's playing really good football at the right time.
Got Joliet Catholic lurking down there as a 12 seed with an interesting matchup against Peoria too.
Yeah, that's another one. And like you look at the Prairie Ridge Nazareth game, that Peoria Joliet Catholic game does not feel like a first round game.
No,
my goodness,
it doesn't.
Yeah.
Wow, that is wild. All right, let's see. We got Class 6A here. Lake Zurich residing at the top of the bracket on the north side. Kankakee on the south side. I'm going to start on that south side, actually. We got a comment from Mark in here. Mark says, K's beat East St. Louis, I think. What do you think of that one, Seuss?
You know how I feel about East St. Louis. I will not agree with that comment there, Mark, but I can see why you're a Kankakee enthusiast in this situation. It's a really good football team.
Yeah.
It really is. I saw it firsthand in week 1 against Nazareth, especially on defense. People aren't talking about their defense, but they've been sensational this year. And like I said, I've said multiple times this year, I have not seen a team as good in the secondary man-on-man coverage in a while. They get after it. They act like a ball up in the air is just as much theirs as the offensive player. It's a very good secondary. So East St. Louis, if they think they're just going to go out and run a bunch of fly patterns like we've seen them do successfully in the past, probably not going to happen. So I'm interested in that because teams have not run the ball very successfully against Kankakee either. So something's got to give. The tenets of what East St. Louis likes to do, they're either going to have to beat down a pretty good Kankakee defense to do what they like, or it's going to be a little bit more of a grind than people think.
I'm a little hesitant to say this because I look at teams on the north side of the bracket there, and I see Cary Grove at the 3 seed, and we just watched Cary Grove pull off the improbable and beat East St. Louis in a state championship game a few years ago. But on paper, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Kankakee versus East St. Louis in that south side, if that comes to fruition as a state quarterfinal, and I feel pretty confident going to, I think that's probably your state title game in terms of your best 2 teams in this class.
Yeah, and it was one of those things when I've been looking at the map all year long and and recognizing how it breaks down, because no one would define Kankakee as being a Southern Illinois school. So, I mean, they're not even close to where if you broke the state in half geographically. I was trying to figure out if there was any way they could get up into the North bracket to just kind of keep them away from East St. Louis potentially until the finals, but logistically it never was going to come to fruition. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that those are the two standout teams in this classification. It's kind of been alluding to that all season long. Unfortunate that it will come to the end there. I've come to that head in the quarterfinals, but sometimes that's just the way it happens. It's yet another argument, and I haven't done this yet. I will do it eventually. I really just want to see, especially in classes like 6A, where the geographic split doesn't seem to be helping any travel, really. I mean, you've got matchups where in this bracket where, teams are traveling, halfway across the state for a first round matchup. Can't we just please go to 1-32? I mean, I don't know if this necessarily would have helped that situation that much, but because of East St. Louis's 2 losses, but yeah. I would really prefer that we just, especially in 5 and 6, we just scrap it and go to 1-32, because there's not nearly as many Southern based teams in either of those classifications to where a 1-16 bracket is helping. It's not helping from a travel standpoint in either of those 2 classes.
You're not going to get an argument from me on that one, Suze. On 6A North, really quickly, I'm going to say my 3 favorites here are Lake Zurich, Cary Grove, and Geneva. I have a hard time kind of parsing between the 3 there. I think maybe my personal bias, because I see Cary Grove the most often, and knowing their history in Class 6A, I want to peg them as the favorite. But this is also a team that missed the playoffs last year. But their only 2 losses this year are also 1-point losses to Prairie Ridge and Huntley. So I have a feeling that's a very, very good Trojans team.
Well, if this bracket breaks down the way that I think it would, a quarterfinal game I'd be very interested in seeing would be Geneva and Cary Grove.
Yeah,
I think that would be a fine matchup of 2 quality programs, grappling to try to get into that semifinal. In that upper half, I think Lake Zurich is the clear favorite to get through, to the very least, the semifinals.
Yeah, I agree. All right, 2 classes to go, everyone. We got a little more than 15 minutes left to do it, Seuss. All right, 7A, where you want to start?
For me, the Saturday game between Mount Carmel and Loyola kind of changed the perspective of this entire bracket. When, assuming that Mount Carmel was going to win that game and sit at the top of this bracket, it had some very interesting permutations. And the biggest one for me is that all of a sudden, this Mount Carmel dropped to the 6th seed, ends up playing St. Rita in the first round. And then by dropping down there, that moves some things around. The Brother Rice St. Rita result, which went differently than I thought it was going to in week 9, then led to Brother Rice jumping up on the seed chart and getting Batavia in the first round. So you have got 2 games right there in the first round between 4 absolute power programs. Because if you were to list, let's just say, sit down and say, I'm going to write out, before I see the bracket, I'm going to write out the 8 teams that here are the 7A teams. Who are the 8 teams that you think you're most likely to see in normal? We don't give you the bracket. You don't get to cheat and look at that. Who would be on that list? I just listed 4 of the 8 that would have been on mine. And those 4 teams are playing each other in the first round. So that, to me, changed the landscape of how we have to look at this bracket right there.
So knowing that you're going to lose a couple of those teams early, that presents some opportunities to some other teams. I like Hersey.
You just went exactly where I was going to go.
Okay, I stole it from you.
This bracket, I think, opens up very nicely for Hersey.
Yep. All right.
Definitely.
Mark here quickly says, can Brother Rice give Batavia a game? Absolutely. The Crusaders can give Brother Rice a game. We talked about, or give Batavia a game. We talked about it a little bit on Saturday night, but Michael Dwojak will also be back with us on Thursday. He covers Chicago Catholic League and East Suburban Catholic Conference for FridayNightDrive.com. I suggest tuning in to the Thursday live stream. That'd be a great question for Michael. So let's go over to 8A here and finish this up. What do you think?
All along, I thought that have a prelude here to a potential rematch of last year's 8A title game with Loyola and Lincoln Way East. It was kind of, well, will they end up on opposite sides of the bracket? Loyola winning that game with Mount Carmel cinched the number 1 seed, slotted Lincoln Way East down to 2. I still believe that is the scenario, but I think we're going to have some adventures along the way. I think there's some pretty darn good football teams that slot in just below them, and I'm interested to see how that all sorts itself out. Barrington's played really well the last couple of weeks after, I think, maybe hitting a little bit of a lull in the middle of the season. They kept winning, but they weren't winning in the fashion that they were winning early in the season. Big win over Palatine a few weeks ago, and now it seems like they're back on track again. Sleeper team, for me, even though they're fairly high-seeded, Edwardsville. They gave East St. Louis a pretty good game when they played in one another in week 8. In week 9, they went over to St. Louis and beat one of Missouri's best teams in Desmet Jesuit. And won by a handy margin. And I still refuse to discount York. I feel like people kind of jumped off the bandwagon after their regular season loss, but that's still a really good football team that I think can make some noise. Underseeds that I kind of like a little bit. You got to look, through the bracket. There are a few teams that I think might make a little noise. I kind of like Lions a little bit. Naperville North might be a team that I think might make a little bit of noise. And St. Ignatius is, I think, in a good position here.
Congrats, Joliet West. You just had your best regular season since the 1960s. You get St. Ignatius as a first-round matchup.
Yeah, so I mean that's a difficult draw for Joliet West, but with St. Ignatius and Justin Scott running back, I think we should.
Yeah.
But no, just a menace, the kind of player that is very, very hard to contain. He'll be a huge challenge for Joliet West in that game. But provided that that goes St. Ignatius's way, I think they can make a little bit of a mini run here until they run into, of course, the behemoth that is Loyola potentially. So, a fun bracket in a lot of ways. There's a lot of interesting first round matchups in here, and some teams that I think we haven't seen a lot in the postseason before, getting at least that opportunity to perform here.
All right, so if we made it through all 8 brackets with a few minutes to spare, man. Before we get out of here, if you're just listening or if you're just tuning in to the Friday Night Drive podcast for the first time, finding us live and wondering what the hell this is, we actually record twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays throughout the postseason. You'll be able to find us live here on YouTube at 11 a.m. You can also listen to this wherever you get your podcasts. Also, we have multiple editions of the Friday Night Drive podcast. We got Eddie Carriffio and JT Penalty. They do the Illinois Valley edition, which covers the western portion of the state. We got the Western Suburbs edition with Jake Barlson and Josh Welge, which hits DuPage County, Cook County, Kendall County, Kane County, all that area. And as I said, Susan and I will be back here later this week. Make sure you stick to FridayNightDrive.com. We'll have a ton of preview content for you. Seuss, got some final thoughts for us?
Just look forward to it getting done, because we're having a lot of great first round matchups here. A lot of opportunities to see some good football right off the bat. And then once we kind of clear off, some of these teams that, got into the playoffs but probably aren't real threats, really looking forward to the second round when this pares down a little bit, because I think you're going to look in every classification. You're going to see some real doozies of games lining up there, because as we've talked about all year long, there's so much. I guess I don't like to use the word parity. It's not my favorite word, but there's just been a lot of games this year where we've had teams winning by razor thin margins, and the teams that lost pick up a loss here, pick up a loss there. So there are just a lot of good 7-2, 6-3 football teams in this draw this year, and in some cases even 5-4 and a couple of 4-5 teams that I think you're looking at them and looking at that record, looking at that seed and thinking, oh, they're not going to do anything. But I would not be surprised to see some double-digit seeds making some serious runs in some of these brackets.
Leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We're signing off for now, though. He is Steve Soucie. I am Kyle Nabors. Stick to FridayNightDrive.com. We'll have plenty of first-round preview content for you. Everyone, have a good week. We'll talk to you guys later.
Come to Candlelight Inn, home of the original Chicken George and Jan Sauce. Dine in, carry out, and catering available. Located in Rock Falls and Sterling, Illinois, as well as Clinton, Iowa. Come try our original Chicken George today.
Need a roof, vinyl windows, or doors? Call R.E. Duchesne Construction. With an A+ rating for the Better Business Bureau and servicing Will, Grundy, and Kendall counties, call R.E. Duchesne. 815-722-2821. Financing available. Find out more online at reduchene.com.
Are going to come right down to the wire.
Yeah, he really likes this field. Team of the Week MVP.
I like Reich.
I like Reich.
Since 2016, it's been my privilege to represent the people of the 63rd District. I want to continue representing you as an independent voice in Springfield.
I like Reich. We like Reich.
We're here to help you with your problems that result from an automobile accident or an injury on the job or the loss of a loved one. There's no reason you should go through this alone and guess that you're doing things right.
We deal with tragedies that affect families and individuals every day.
Come here and protect your interest. We've been doing this collectively for over 100 years. Let's put that experience to work for you.